To our viewers and listeners, welcome. This debate is presented by City Club of Corvallis and the Corvallis Advocate. City Club of Corvallis is a volunteer-run nonprofit organization that seeks to present a diversity of viewpoints and constructive dialogue. The Advocate offers a fresh daily hyperlocal news for Corvallis, town halls and debates, and an extensive weekly calendar. I'm Steve Schultz of the Corvallis Advocate, and co-moderating with me today is Helen Higgins, an active community volunteer and previous City Club board member. Today, we host the debate for Ward 6. The candidates are Allison Bowden, Richard Masella, and Brennan Kohlberg. Helen?
Welcome, candidates. I'd like to start with our first question, and we'll begin with Brennan. If you could please introduce yourself and tell us what your primary reasons are for running for re-election, and you have 1 minute.
Office, not re-election. My name is Brent. My name's Brennan. I'm a Corvallis resident for 5 years. I started attending city council meetings about a year or two ago, and got recruited this spring by our incumbent, Lori Chaplin, to run for her seat because she can't for family reasons. My background, I'm a software engineer and entrepreneur. I put systems design expert on my ballot statement because that's a lot of what I do. I have a deep understanding and lots of experience dealing with complex codified systems, which is what the city has in all of its systems, in the economy it manages, and so forth. I think we basically have one giant problem facing us here in Corvallis, which is that we are the most rent-burdened city in Oregon. So our ratio of housing prices to incomes is extremely low for this state. What this means in practice is caused by two things. It's caused by lower incomes than we could have, and it's caused by higher housing costs than we could have. I think that it's important to fix this by bringing in more and more industry in order to get better jobs and also increase the city's tax base so that it needs to tax less and can spend more on various community improvement projects. And then we also need much more housing via also generally regulatory things.
All right, thank you, Brennan. So we'll move to Allison. Please tell us why you are running for city council.
Hi, my name is Allison Bowden. I'm a local union leader with the Corvallis School District, representing the classified staff, where I'm also the technology systems manager. I'm running for city council because I am passionate about Corvallis and want to help make our community better. I've had the privilege of living here the last 8 years and renting here the last 8 years, and I'm acutely aware of the housing struggles that our community faces, as well as issues surrounding multimodal transportation. I'm running for city council because as an active union leader and local organizer, I've worked with our tenants organizing unit, Tenants United Corvallis, to get a better understanding about what the issues are in our community and how to advocate for renters and future homeowners as well. My strategy in the past has been to devote my time to the most effective resource available. So I've considered running in the past, but the value analysis has typically been my efforts, the limited time that I have in a day, is best dedicated towards issues that I can directly impact and know that change will come out of. So that's why I've primarily focused on union advocacy and tenant advocacy. I'm running for council because I'm a part of a slate of candidates who are committed to affordable housing, climate action, and better transportation in Corvallis. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Rich, please introduce yourself. Tell us why you are running.
Hi, I'm Richard Masella. I am an 8-year resident of Corvallis and currently a stay-at-home father to a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. My background is in brewing. The reason why I am running for city council is that my oldest child recently started kindergarten, and that has given me some more time to be available. And I thought a good use of that time would be to give back to the community that I love and continue to make Corvallis a wonderful place to live. That I think we can results in one of our big issues. As my two opponents have said, housing affordability is a big issue in Corvallis because everybody wants to live here because it's such a beautiful place. And if elected to city council, I'd love to work with the other council members to make sure that Corvallis can be more affordable for everyone. We can address issues of houselessness and make for a more pedestrian friendly, bike friendly, and public transportation friendly community. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, let's move into our first question. We'll begin with Allison. Housing is on the forefront of the minds and concerns of many residents. What ideas would you bring forward to address housing inventory? And you have a minute and 30 seconds.
My answer is going to be build up, not out. We need to commit resources to expanding our residential infill programs and reducing the barriers it takes for local developers and organizations to go through the permitting process and invest in the affordable housing that our community needs. If elected to council, I will work with our permitting offices and public planners to ensure that developers have access to the toolkits and resources to ensure that their proposals can go through this process more smoothly, and we can actually start building more in Corvallis. The city has done a great job at reducing those barriers so far, but obviously it's not meeting the needs, and it takes time to continue building those affordable units that we desperately need in our community. Overall, I'm committed to working with local nonprofit and for-profit partners to ensure that we get to increase the housing supply in a way that's beneficial, not to just low-income individuals, but also to that middle income, and investing in that middle housing that Corvallis really needs to allow our community to thrive and grow. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, Richard, will you take the next response?
Okay. I think that we need to explore all options as far as making housing more affordable for our community. I think that includes building up as well as building outward. I think that we can explore our annexation options without contributing to urban sprawl. If we do build outward, there's nothing, or we would, as a city council, would be able to use the zoning tools in our bag to make sure that we're not just building large single-family homes that only serve one part of the community. We would also be able to build apartments, condos, affordable housing in those areas. But I really think that we need to use all of the tools in our bag, from zoning, from building affordable housing, and seeking state level and national resources to help in funding that and our infrastructure that will be needed to meet those needs.
Great, thank you. And Brennan, what ideas would you bring forward to address housing inventory?
There, a lot has already been said. As to zoning, the city recently upzoned in the last 2 or 3 years a lot of areas such that my understanding from conversations with the city staff is that zoning is actually no longer a limiting factor. And so in general, I think more construction is better in all sorts of ways. Infill is great. I love infill. I don't really use my car because I love this core of Corvallis that we are seeking to represent. But we also need to grow, externally. We need to grow in all directions, up, sideways, in everything. My understanding, is our permitting process is it's quite slow, it's quite uncertain, and it's quite expensive. This is also the lever that we have the most control over as a city, to be able to streamline, to be able to make predictable by those who want to invest large amounts of capital here. It's important for councilors to put themselves in the heads of the people who are looking at building the housing in Corvallis. They have this amount of some amount of capital. They want to do something with it. Do they know they can do it? Do they know they can do it in a reasonable amount of time? So that's one of the big levers to pull. I also, I think that's the main thing. We also need to figure out how to increase the amount of skilled labor available in the area. because my understanding is that that's the current bottleneck to housing construction, although that's new in the last year or two because the city council has actually been dealing with a lot of the particularly zoning problems. Notably, the downtown is now zoned to 123 feet, which doesn't match any of the buildings there. But pretty soon we're going to see like retail with, 8 to 10 stories on top of it in a lot of places.
Great, thank you.
All right. Would I be able to respond to any of those comments? It's okay if not.
Yeah, no, we're just going to move through a series of questions. All right, so the next question actually is moving on to what are your views on how we're addressing homelessness in Corvallis? Specifically, do you believe or what do you believe would be best practices for our community going forward? We're going to start with Richard on this one.
Okay, I think that we're doing an okay job of currently addressing our houseless problem. And I think that a lot of issues, from talking to a few people that are involved in our homeless shelters currently, is that they have open beds that are not necessarily being used. And I think some of that is that we need to diversify the options for those that are in need of housing. As far as lower barriers, a lot of the reasons why people will not take advantage of homeless shelters and choose to camp, live on the street, live in their cars, is because they need to either get rid of their pets or their belongings, and they don't have a safe location to keep either of those things. So I think we need to explore an option where people can more permanently be housed, where they can bring their pets, where there are little to no barriers to who is allowed to access what types of emergency housing. And I also think that for those that are living in their cars or RVs, I think it would be good to explore some options where we can provide areas that have access to water, electricity, toilet facilities, and trash pickup and removal.
All right, thank you. All right, Brennan.
Hey there. Ultimately, we solve homelessness by low housing costs. And so that goes back to this first question. But that doesn't happen right away. So how does it work? So I'm a co-leader of our church's homeless ministry, and I go out every Saturday to hand out. It's around 60 sandwiches a week that we do. Talking with people, hearing their stories, figuring out why they're out there. A lot of it is that we have federal and state programs which actually help with housing quite a bit, but they have extremely long wait lists, and so people are sort of just like hanging around for a year or two. There's a guy named Jesse over by Home Depot that I talked to at length about this problem. We basically need a place for people to wait while all their assistance gets through the system. I would be in favor of designating a part of a park that's relatively accessible and somewhat out of the way, perhaps the Meadow in Pioneer Park, to have more of like a safe like campsite, a place where perhaps there's some washing facilities for clothes, there's dumpsters, there's a cop there to guard against like domestic violence, and most importantly, that there's a way for people to be able to leave their stuff reliably to go off to a job. Because a lot of the reason the reason a lot of these people don't have jobs and can't really get out of the cycle is that if they leave their stuff for 6 hours to go to an interview or to work a shift, it disappears, it's stolen. I don't think the suites are incredibly helpful. It seems pretty cruel, pretty wasteful. But as I understand it, under current law, we do have to do those. Anyway, I would look towards trying to establish a more organized and safe and resource-rich camping system, at least in the short to medium term.
Helen, you're muted.
Thank you. Allison, your question.
Thank you. So I first want to say my views on homelessness: housing is a human right. the only way to ultimately solve the problem is to get people in housing. I think all three of us are in agreement with that. It's the methodology where we differ. Similar to Brennan, I am all for a transitional housing program. And in fact, the city has already started investing in that with the Van Buren Court purchase that recently went through. It's still a ways out from the city being able to actually invite residents in and manage that program, but I think it's a nudge in the right direction. The sweeps, however, are exactly the opposite of what we need to be doing. They are cruel, inhumane, and ultimately just exacerbate the problem. Studies have shown again and again that stability, whether that's in sheltered stability or at least like consistency in the lives of folks experiencing houselessness, is the method that leads to the most positive outcomes, whether that be getting into housing, getting a job, getting help with their mental illness, or whatever life circumstances that are essentially leading to that. So I would also advocate for, within the confines of the city charter, utilizing a city park or a city resource as a transitional housing program and working with local nonprofits to connect people with the resources while they wait on that housing, or they wait on those HUD waivers, or until we can get them into the units that the city is helping facilitate and working with developers to build. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And this will be a quick 30-second. It's a follow-up on what your views would be on the sweeps. And Allison, you spoke to that, but we'll start with you. 30 seconds. Anything more you'd like to say about that?
So the city is actually working directly against the county when they participate, when they enforce sweeps. The county is literally providing tents and other supplies to folks experiencing houselessness. And when the sweeps go through, they are throwing that equipment directly into the trash. It's ridiculous. It's a waste of taxpayer dollars and should be discontinued immediately. Human dignity is so important, and the sweeps do nothing to solve the problem other than make a park more clean.
All right, thank you. Richard, your question.
Yes, I think they're unproductive, they're cruel. It's not the best. It doesn't serve the public good, in my opinion.
And Brennan.
Well, unfortunately, I think they're legally necessary right now. That said, until we can fix that problem, yeah, very cruel, very unproductive. You're just putting people, I mean, you know, I've seen this over the course of years. Like they just, like the people circle around through these parks, you know, getting their stuff thrown away every single time. It's not, it doesn't solve any meaningful problem here. On the other hand, we do have to have, like, you know, we can't just surrender all of our parks. And it is like when there are people, especially in like the Shallowa Point area, that get cleared out, you know, there's actually a lot more families enjoying the space afterward. So I think we should just have one area that we say, okay, be here, and just, you know, stop the circus.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to move on now to the topic of local business. So some of our downtown business owners are updating their buildings, and we've got a new hotel, retail, and apartment project on the horizon. If presented with the opportunity to support either an urban renewal district or a tax incremental financing proposal, would you support it? If so, why? And if not, why not? You'll have 1 minute, and we will start with Brennan.
Yes, I would support this. I believe urban renewal and tax increment financing are the same thing, actually. Yes, and not only would I support it, but this is the kind of thing that shouldn't have to go to the city council. This should, the city staff should be given power to do these in order to encourage development. Not really a question.
Okay, thank you. Allison, your thoughts?
I would support investing in an urban renewal district. I think that before we can, the goal is to offload these duties of permitting to city staff, but our city housing code, or our building code for business permitting still needs some tweaking to align with our livability and pedestrian friendly standards. So once we can commit those resources to revising those statutes, I think absolutely let's have city staff be in charge and like move that permitting through so we can really invest in local business.
Thank you. And Richard.
Yeah, I would also support that. I think that the more business that we can bring in town, even if we are providing some degree of tax breaks, still broadens our tax base that we can pull on. And I think that we all want a downtown that is more filled with businesses instead of for rent or for sale signs that other than it currently is right now.
Great, thank you. And Brennan, I'll circle back to you since you were very brief on your answer. I'll give you 30 seconds.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that my understanding is that this is not so much a permitting problem as an incentive problem. So the urban renewal and tax increment financing basically freezes or reduces the property taxes for a set period of time in order to do this. I actually think further that this kind of thing should be more structurally baked in without even having to be an option. I'm in support of like differential land value taxes as opposed to just property taxes, such that people aren't penalized for improving the value of their property. But that's blocked at the state level. Anyway, that's all.
Great, thank you. All right, so a financially sustainable community includes a robust business community. What can we do to attract more business or industry to Corvallis? You have 1 minute, and we'll start with Allison.
I think a lot of this goes back to one of my original answers on housing. It's the confusion and the longest wait periods are really associated with the permitting process and going back and forth on designs and ensuring that applications are put well together. I really do think that council needs to, and city staff need to partner and invest resources into improving and aligning those standards with our livability code and pedestrian friendly design orientation to ensure that the permitting process matches what council wants the city the city design philosophy standards to be. The reason why these permits don't go through and why they come in front of council and are necessarily denied is because the code, the permitting, the application does not align with the values that council necessarily has. So we need to do work to make sure those two things are matching, and then that will allow and lower the barriers for businesses to come in and go through that process effectively.
Thank you. Rich, same question.
I think that we can, as with the urban renewal options, we can look at providing reduced tax incentives that are temporary in order to get businesses here and help them get off their feet in the initial process of either starting their business or moving their business into town. And I also think that we can start looking at in the future expanding some of our infrastructure out. So whether it be retail business, manufacturing business, or residential, that it's kind of ready to go, and whoever wants to build what they are going to doesn't have to wait on that infrastructure to be ready to go.
Great, thank you. And Brennan, same question, 1 minute.
Okay, a couple quick points here. Yeah, Allison's right. We need to take the subjectivity out of the law such that instead of the city council subjectively deciding something after like 2 years of application, they can tell ahead of time and it's all more deterministic. Separately, my understanding from talking with city officials is that we're actually limited more on industrial land availability, and particularly stuff being shovel ready. Various wetland stuff. I'm in favor of allocating money to proactively develop infrastructure to and around large sites to be paid back when they're actually developed, because there are actually a lot of people who want to come into Corvallis, but they just can't do it in a reasonable timeline because they don't want to have to build everything out ahead of time. And then, yeah, permitting needs to be really fast and deterministic. Yeah, industrial development is going to be basically my top priority. It gives us better jobs. It gives us, more free tax or property tax revenue. Great stuff. Yeah.
Great, thank you. All right, Allison, did you have something briefly on this, or can we move to the next question?
I have something brief if there's time.
Okay, go ahead.
I just do want to note that we do have a high proportion of partially vacant or entirely vacant industrially zoned land within the city already. So that's a point just I wanted to clarify. And maybe you intended to say that it's the pre-development process that isn't necessarily being invested in, but that's just something I wanted to clarify.
Okay, and Brennan, I'm gonna give you 20 seconds, then we're gonna move to the next question.
Allison's correct. We have a lot of land. The problem is that infrastructure isn't there. So it's exactly as they say, it's the pre-development process that we need to, I would say, proactively do so that it's easier for people to come in.
Perfect. That is actually a perfect segue into the next question, because we are now going to talk about city infrastructure. So the city has a lengthy list of both public works projects and facility maintenance and repairs. And the delayed maintenance has shown up in things like burst water pipes and office spaces that are outdated and cramped. So what process would you use to prioritize funding for projects? And do you have an opinion as to what is most critical to put at the top of the list for action? So you'll have a minute and a half, and we're going to start with Brennan.
Yeah, we have a lot of infrastructure problems. I mean, I think priority wise, I think the main debate right now is around like the civic campus on how important that is. They're going to be doing more detailed presentations on that in October and November in the city council. The Parks and Rec thing I think is much more important, but that might already be dealt with before we get to council or whoever is elected here. But yeah, I think the next thing up is like probably the police station and then a civic campus. Pending, of course, like basic infrastructure things like replacing our deteriorating sewer and water pipes. But that's more of on a separate tangent. I think we should develop as fast as we can, develop for the long run, and try to keep costs down so we're not soaking people here. But it is really important to get a lot of these capital projects in. Yeah, I'll leave some time in case I need to respond to someone.
Okay, great. Thank you. So Allison, we'll go to you next.
Yeah, echoing that, I think all three of us are in agreement that there are some pretty serious infrastructure problems within the city itself. For prioritizing civic campus, I agree. Parks and Rec, that facility, it should be one of the higher priorities in that list of buildings, as well as the fire station 4. Again, I think those two things have already been pushed through the process and are like on the prioritization to be up first, or at least some of the first things. And then as for the remaining projects, I think we need to start investing in them, but maybe ensure that we're also focusing on our housing as we move forward with these, because we want to ensure that we are expanding our tax base within reasonable measures by investing in the affordable housing, getting more persons into the city, and then that will increase our budget and be able to actually invest the money that without going overspending in the city budget to actually invest in these capital improvement projects.
Thank you. And Rich, your question.
Okay, yeah, I think that as far as the priorities, I agree. It sounds like the Avery Park is the Parks and Rec, Public Works is going ahead, and that is probably not going to be something that we do. I am in favor of decoupling all of the civic campus because I think that whether it be Firehouse 4, the police, or municipal buildings, I think that the fact that the evidence from the police station floods is very unsettling as far as the potential impacts on future cases and, administering of justice in our community. And then, municipal office space, though inadequate, I don't think needs to be a top priority when compared to something like vital services of police, fire, and water infrastructure. We all need to drink good, clean water. And if we do not invest in the aging infrastructure that delivers our water and takes our waste away, and then it deteriorates to the level where it bursts. I live a couple blocks from where it did on 10th recently. That's a huge issue, and it is more expensive to deal with it as an emergency than it is to proactively address that.
Great, thank you. All right, you all have mentioned it here, but the next question is around the civic campus that is being explored right now by the city to replace City Hall, council chambers, municipal court, and possibly the fire station. So what's your view of the necessity of the new facility, if you'd like to say more about that, and how you'd approach getting it paid for? So this one, we're going to start with Allison and go to Richard and Brennan. And you have 1 minute.
Thank you. I think I'm just going to echo and expand on my previous answer. I agree with Richard in decoupling a lot of these projects to prioritize them and keep them in line with the other city priorities and ensure we're delivering services to all residents of Corvallis instead of just focusing on city staff infrastructure. So that includes prioritizing the Parks and Rec, the Fire Station 4 facility, and then as for ensuring that we're staying within budget and being able to pay for these in a fiscally responsible way, I would advocate for investing in the affordable housing, in the business, in updating our permitting processes so we can draw in more economic activity, local business, more residents in our city who can afford to live here so that our tax base is increasing at a rate that will support these hugely important capital investment projects. But we need to make sure that we're spending in a fiscally responsible way and being good stewards of city funds. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, Brennan, I believe I said next.
I thought Rich usually goes after.
Okay, either way.
Okay, I'll just go.
I got off on my list, so it's that human moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think something civic campus wise would be good and necessary. I mean, you know, it'd be nice to have some nice new sexy council chambers, but it's like we need to be able to have it at a, you know, fiscally sustainable price, and then also be able to pay for it. I think again, you know, I'm sorry to the voters because we're all sort of in alignment here on the tax base needing to expand in order to do property taxes. I can't fully give my answer to this because part of it I've promised not to say publicly because I have some conversations. I think it's worth looking at different revenue streams other than just property tax that the city has available to it at a legislatural level. Property tax, it can really only go up 3% per year. That's far under inflation. And so if we want to be able to sustainably fund both operations and capital improvements going into the future, we need to look at, you know, ways to get revenue into the city coffers that aren't regressive, you know, fees soaking every household and are not, you know, fees disincentivizing investment and are not property taxes. So there might be some options.
Great, thank you. Okay, Rich, your question.
All right. Yeah, generally in agreement with both Brennan and Allison. I think that expanding our tax base would be hugely helpful. I'm not opposed to exploring a levy to fund these things, but I think the most important thing is to have each priority or each potential infrastructure project looked at on its own so that, let's say, the police station is not being held hostage by the greater municipal civic campus, and that likewise with the other projects. We should look at each thing on its own merit, and by spreading it out, we can kind of pay for this over a greater period of time, and then, you know, lessen the immediate burden on the community.
Great, thank you. All right, final question in this round. Water bills, water bill fees. This is a topic of conversation with residents who have seen the service fees continue to increase on their water bills. How would you balance the need for the city to generate revenue with the impact of these increasing costs on homeowners and renters? And this time we're going to start with Rich on this one.
Okay, I think that this is, I don't want to say simple, but I think that we would be best served if instead of most households paying the same flat fee regardless of their usage of the system, that we should shift to a model that is purely based on usage of our water and sewer systems, where the people that are using the most and putting the most burden on the system will also pay the most. And small households that are barely touching our water and sewer usage will pay the least.
Great, thank you. All right, I'm going to move to Brennan and then to Allison.
Yeah, the fees are really regressive. Everyone pays them instead of just the people with the more means paying them disproportionately. However, it's really the only lever we have as a city right now. And in fact, we've actually used it a lot less. So our city services bill on our water is around like 100. In Portland, it's 200, 250. This is ultimately because of Props 5 and 50 strangling our property tax base artificially. I think the best way, sort of short term there to work around is to increase the property tax base. We've been hammering this theme over and over again. More industry, more housing, yada yada. But then also, again, we need to look at other ways that the city might be able to get a sustainable revenue that are not based on property taxes, which are limited to a 3% increase per year, falling short, and therefore requiring cuts in either services or hiking of other taxes. The reason we hike these fees, it's the only lever we have, and so we need another lever in order to not hike the fees. It really comes down to that, as sad as it is.
Great. Thank you, Allison.
So it's hard because the three of us do agree on so many things. So I'm not going to reiterate again too many of the same points other than stating that I agree. We are, as taxpayers of our city services bill, it is not equitable to continue squeezing the residents, especially residents experiencing or low income residents or even middle income residents. Really, we need to be looking towards the people who are costing the city more in terms of water services and infrastructure services. This is kind of a hot topic, but I do want to bring it up. OSU doesn't pay property taxes currently. I see you laughing. I'm going to be transparent about it. The city is currently outside of negotiations with contract with OSU regarding city services. And it's frustrating to see how much usage of their infrastructure, of our infrastructure they provide or they participate in, and yet they aren't paying for those services. So I really do think we need to engage in negotiations with them and make sure that every large organization in the city is paying their fair share.
Great, thank you. All right, I see two hands. So Brennan and then Rich, I'm going to give you each 20 seconds. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, like right on. Our big organizations, not only we love our big organizations here, but also they're freeloading a little bit. You have the water bill, but then also I think it's important to note that one of the reasons our property tax base is so small is that our biggest organizations in town don't really pay it. OSU's nonprofit, Samaritan's nonprofit, HP has their property tax artificially marked down 90% by the state. And so one of the reasons we need to hike these water bills is because we don't have the kind of industry that most cities have in order to actually fund their services properly.
Okay, thank you. And Rich, comment?
Yeah, I was actually going to bring up Samaritan as well as agreed that we do need to work with our large partners in town to maybe see what ways we can more equitably spread around those the burden of our infrastructure and usage.
Great, thank you. And Allison, I guess I owe you also a 20-second, and then we're going to wrap it up and move to the lightning round. Go ahead.
I will say, even though Samaritan is nonprofit, they do currently engage in a city contract where they pay a fair share of the city services. It's not the same as receiving a water bill with the city services attached, but they are paying more of their fair share than other organizations in our city.
Great, thank you. And I just want to comment that all organizations are subject to the fees on the water bill, all nonprofits. So I think that is how the city's brought some funding forward. All right, so we're going to conclude this section of it. We're going to move on into the lightning round with Steve. Steve, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Helen. Before we really begin, and I want a couple of basic housekeeping items. One, I'm going to want to actually talk with Brennan here and then get your Allison and Rich's responses on it. So why don't we do that first? So you'd commented that there could be other revenue streams. Give me 30 seconds on what you meant by that, Brennan.
I believe the state charter authorizes cities to issue payroll taxes.
Okay. Now, we know that it only had a 13% approval rating in Salem when Salem tried it. And I think they have it in Eugene, and I'm not sure how that's working. Do you think it's viable for Corvallis to do that?
I'm not too familiar with the situation. I think it's worth looking into all the options that we have.
Okay, good.
And
Any other streams you can think of?
one unique thing is that we have a grandfathered in high rate for our lodging tax. So we have a 9% lodging tax, but we keep a disproportionate share of it compared to what's now required. Like I believe we have the number might be wrong, but I think we give 30%.
Payroll tax, lodging tax. What else you got?
Those are the primary ones that I'm aware of.
Great. Allison, response to Brennan payroll tax.
I do want to respond to the lodging tax. So if Corvallis were to look into increasing that, we would lose the grandfathered status, and we would have to allocate those according to like the legislation that went through during the after the grandfather period. As for payroll tax, I would be interested to see in the impact. I don't necessarily love the idea of taking living wages away from people who are already struggling to afford housing in Corvallis, which is why I am more in favor of a vacant property tax that focuses on industrial zone properties, but also rental properties that are included in that. Berkeley already passed this, and they've saw very successful revenue streams. And with that, with obviously a little bit of industrial pushback, but it's mostly the industrial business or the industrial landowners, not the businesses themselves, that would be affected by this. Downtown has a lot of vacant property, and it's not just because of permitting; it's a lot because of the industrial rent.
I'm going to move on. Rich.
Yeah, I think I would be interested in a possible payroll tax if it were to be targeted at people making above a certain minimum level. I think would be most effective. But I would also welcome community feedback on how popular that would be. Lodging tax, I think Allison's concerns are legitimate there. And then as far as a vacant property tax, I think that is a good idea.
Great. Okay, so we're in lightning round, and we have a variety of questions from a variety of sources. They may feel a bit random and all over the map. Let us begin. I'm going to say this one's about 30 seconds. Do you believe the city's pursuit of the Ellis matter has been a good use of the city's time and resources? I'll begin with Allison.
No. The initial complaint is that Ellis was engaging in violating the city charter that's supposed to protect against nepotism and advocating and disallowing counselors to advocate for hiring specific people into a specific position. The original statement was just, please hire a climate advocacy specialist. It was not advocating for her friend, her family member, or anyone that she would directly benefit from. So I think it's been a waste of resources, and I just want to move on.
Got it. I'm going to go ahead and move over to Rich.
No, it was not a good use of resources or time. It's also a moot point, as she is going to be elected again since she is running unopposed. And as Allison said, it appears to have been a misunderstanding of what she was asking.
Okay, and Brennan.
Pretty much the same. I don't think it was a great use of money. I think it's a moot point. I would also note that it was Ellis that initiated the legal action that has cost, as of my understanding, about $200,000. But of course, it was the city that before that, took action that provoked her. I think it's was not a great reflection on the city of the whole shebang. But hopefully, it will be over.
Okay, let's move to the next question. And actually, Rich, I'll begin with you on this one. What can the city of Corvallis do to work with Benton County to ensure that Republic Services is a responsible and ethical partner and steward of the landfill. Rich, 30 seconds.
I hope that the county decides to deny the permit for the landfill expansion is the first thing that I would like to see. They will continue accepting our Benton County trash. They have plenty of room for it. We don't need to be accepting trash from outside of the state. And something else that I think that we need to be looking at is finding out what is in the leachate that currently comes from the landfill and goes to our water treatment plant and is likely not suited to treat that leachate. But first of all, we need to test and find out what is actually in it before we continue accepting.
I'm going to move over to Brennan.
Not too aware of
30 seconds.
Not too aware of the specific details between Benton County and the thing, but yeah, I landfill is sort of outside our jurisdiction. I would look at the leachate sort of processing situation. My understanding is we do get paid to process that, so there's a balance between water bill cost and then like safety of the drinking water. I think it's important to know.
Allison.
Neither the city nor Public Services test that leachate for PFAS, known as the forever chemical, or other heavy metals before it goes into our municipal water supply system, water processing system. I think we can act on that immediately by discontinuing the acceptance until they can prove that it doesn't contain hazardous levels, or making them pay more of their fair share for processing these out. Our facilities are not designed to process chemical contamination. We are supposed to be processing natural river resources and sediment that comes out of that. It's an incongruence. So
what do you think the city can do to partner with Benton County to hold Republic accountable?
As for partnership, I think that okay, this is a little bit of a controversial statement, so I'm going to go for it. I think we need to reevaluate our franchise agreement with them if Republic Services cannot commit to following EPA standards, following DEQ standards, and actually testing their leachate before putting it into our supply. I think that is something that's a huge lever that we have access to and a huge power at the bargaining table that we can take.
I gave you a little bit of extra time there, Allison.
Sorry.
Good answer, though. I want to go ahead and give just Brennan and Rich 15 seconds each to respond to your statement there. It's a good answer.
I know less about this than Allison does. No extra comment.
Okay, great. And I'm going to move to Rich.
Yeah, I agree. We need to know what is in that leachate, and if we're going to be accepting it, they need to pay for the equipment and the effort that it takes to appropriately treat it and make sure that we're not poisoning the river.
Right. Okay, thanks. I'm going to move to divestment. A number of the candidates have stated that they believe the city should divest itself of any investments in Israeli companies or companies that profit out of Israel. I'm going to go ahead and start with Brennan on this one. 30 seconds.
Not in favor of divestment. I think it would take a lot of time and effort on the part of the finance department to track this kind of thing, and conflicts across the oceans are not the priority or jurisdiction of the Corvallis City Council.
Allison, 30 seconds, up to 30 seconds.
To my knowledge, the city of Corvallis does not directly economically benefit or have partnerships with any defense organizations, weapons supply, or any armory. If there are that I'm not aware of, I would absolutely want the divestment in those services. But as for Israeli companies in general, they don't represent the views of the Israeli government, in my opinion. So those are the I would divest if it's directly contributing to active violence in Palestine.
Rich?
Yeah, I don't, I'm currently unaware of any investment that the city is currently making that would support either weapons of war that are being used in the Middle East currently, or companies that they support that are actively promoting any sort of genocide. But if that were to be shown, I would certainly approve of not participating.
Let's move to noise ordinances. Do you believe the city? So the example is this. Woman got in front of council during, or a constituent got in front of council during comment period, public comment period, that an air conditioning compressor had been installed at a neighbor's building. It was about a foot away from her window, was running night and day over the summer, making a bunch of racket. Right now, apparently, we do not have any requirements or ordinances or code on the books that specify decibel limits. We don't have an inspection regimen for these, apparently, like we do so many other things that have to do with building and planning and development. Would you favor the city adding some development code in terms of noise ordinances for these kinds of machinery, of this kind of machinery, heating, cooling, in terms of decibel limits and inspections? I will go ahead and I will start with Rich.
Yeah, so I think it's something that is possibly worth looking into. I would be very curious to know what the actual decibel level is on this particular complaint, but I do understand the need for many individuals, people suffering from asthma or other respiratory diseases, or with limited breathing capacities, to need air conditioning, especially in the hot months when it is more difficult for them to breathe. And that is also a health concern that goes beyond just noise and livability.
Great, thanks. I'm going to move over to Allison on this one.
So I was actually at the city council meeting where this woman spoke, and my heart absolutely went out to her. I would support a noise ordinance. I was actually surprised to learn that we didn't have anything on the books for that. So I would absolutely support rolling out an initial policy, specifically in high density living areas, because this is new for the city. The policy is not going to be perfect at first. So let's try it out in the places most likely to experience noise complaints with close living quarters and high residential usage. So once we can work out the kinks and ensure that it's an equitable solution to balancing, the health of individuals who need the air processing with like the sanity for that noise causes. So, and then we can roll it out to other areas.
I'm gonna need to move over to Brennan. 30 seconds, Brennan.
Same. I was watching online this meeting. I think that the problem is a real one. I'm sure other more denser places have code on the books that deals with this adequately. I would favor copy pasting some standard noise ordinance thing. Wouldn't want it to be too much of an imposition, but seems like we should have some rules here.
Great, and then I'm going to start with you on this one, Brennan. City attorney contract has been a discussion for a while. I think we brought it up at first last year over at the Advocate. Right now, they're paid hourly. For years, we had somebody on retainer as a flat fee each month. Other cities in Oregon have hired their own counsel. You see that over at the county as well. They have a county counsel. In terms of when this contract comes up in a couple of years, what would you support investigating? Would you maybe want to look at a retainer where you've got more unlimited access, or maybe even the city hiring an attorney, like so many other communities in Oregon? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start with Rich on this one, actually.
Yeah, I think having someone permanently, like a city attorney that we have hired, brings a sort of, we know what we're going to pay. It's a lot more predictable, and it's probably easier to fit into the budget rather than having costs that fluctuate.
Okay. And then I'm going to move over to Allison.
I was surprised to learn when the city switched from a hired position to the hourly contract. From what I understand, it was more economically sustainable for the city, but I think in the long run, we're going to experience harms from that. Like there's discussion of completely removing the city attorney from council meetings, like unless we know ahead of time. I would advocate for sharing resources and investing with Benton County for either invest or a shared contract or like a hired staff position that can be shared among several cities. That's just kind of a spitball idea, but I think that we could really benefit, and the other municipalities surrounding us could benefit from dedicated, consistent legal counsel that doesn't fluctuate with usage.
And I'm going to move to Brennan.
I think it's important for us to have our own legal counsel to represent our interests, particularly in case we have conflicts with local bodies. I would prefer more sustainable costs, so looking at retainer type stuff. My understanding is that we don't have enough legal work to really justify an in-house counsel, but I don't actually know what the volume of the hourly on our current contract is. Yeah, I mean, happy to look at all options. My default would be to go towards a retainer, but I don't know a ton about this issue.
Yeah, good. Then I'm going to move to last question before closing. We may have two questions to say. Okay. We had a situation come up earlier in the year, and I will admit that the Corvallis Advocate went somewhat ballistic about this. The Optum takeover of Corvallis Clinic. We believe that the community will rue the day that that occurred. It was something that had been long in the works. Obviously, the city council does not get to vote on this. However, it does impact the well-being and livability of our community, the well-being of the constituents in the community and the livability of our community going forward. In an instance like that, what would you do to advocate for your constituents? I will start with Allison. 30 seconds.
We may not have a vote in this, but we do have a voice. Advocating for using the public position and the large visibility seat of a city councilor, if elected, I would absolutely advocate both at the local and state level for the expansion of organ healthcare plans and ultimately a single payer plan, because this would not be a problem if insurance carriers and weren't a limiting factor to guarantee healthcare. I have been attending the Mid-Valley Healthcare Advocate meetings. I am a huge supporter of universal healthcare, and I am frustrated to live in a society where profits and insurance, types of insurance that are accepted by medical facilities, limit access to a basic human need. So I would use the public seat of a counselor.
Brennan, 30 seconds.
I don't think that it's really within the mandate of a Corvallis City Councilor to advocate for their own personal political priorities that from the rostrum of the City Council. I mostly think that we should stay out of private matters like this. So I would likely not say anything or interfere in my official capacity.
Rich?
Yeah, I think as a community and as individuals, we can do our best to support and hopefully vote for candidates that would push towards a universal healthcare, where this would become a non-issue because healthcare is a human right and everybody has the right to access.
Okay, and actually we will go ahead and we'll move to closing. And I would specifically be interested in statements that have to do with what differentiates you from your opponents in this race. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to begin with Brennan. I'm going to give you 45 seconds, Brennan.
Yeah, I think I have a deep experience working with code. I would I do a lot of software code, legal code. It's similar. I've already read most of our code and charter. I would try to get in the weeds a little more because I think I have sort of in-depth expertise there. Other than that, differentiation wise, I just think generally a more systems economic level understanding is my focus. That's where I come at the problems from. Like I was, of the three of us, I was the one who started talking about all the tax-based stuff, and they came along because I'm right, but that's good. So yeah, I think just like the systems perspective, the economic perspective, the, getting into the nitty-gritty with the code, that's my relative strength. But a lot of our sort of interests and priorities are aligned here.
Before we move over to, and I gave you practically a minute, so I'm going to do the same for your other two opponents. But before we move on to their closing statements, I do want to say that after I would like you to all wait past our closing and past the all clear from recording before leaving, because I'd like to talk with you for a moment after the all clear. Next, Allison, 1 minute, because I wound up giving Brennan a minute.
So while we agree on many of our priorities and platform positions, I think the main differentiation is going to be experience with public policy. As a union member and a union leader, I have been at the bargaining table and played an active role in the last 2 major contracts for the classified staff of the Corvallis School District. And in fact, this last session, I was the official minutes recorder as well. This means that I have experience not only negotiating, but working within the constraints of a public budget, understanding and having to balance the advocacy for union workers and education workers in the district with the financial stewardship and responsibility of city district management to continue the economic sustainability of the district for years to come. Because of these experiences and my continued advocacy, I believe that this sets me apart, but I encourage all of us, whether we win or lose, to continue advocating for Corvallis because we all clearly care so deeply.
Thank you, Allison. I'm moving to Rich now.
All right, thank you, Brennan, and thank you, Allison. Yes, while our general goals all remains very similar, I think the thing that differentiates me from the other two candidates is that I do not have a full-time job, which makes me more flexible and available to the voters. I would like to be more of a listening ear. I know that I don't have all the answers to our community's problems, but I think that I have a very good ability to listen to all of the possible solutions to the various problems that we'll encounter and can work from that to decide what is in the best interest of our community and what best serves the city of Corvallis.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard Masella, Allison Bowden, and Brennan Kohlberg, Ward 6 candidates. Also, I want to thank Helen Higgins for co-moderating. Also, staff, volunteers, subscribers, donors, and sponsors that make these debates possible. The advocate plans to issue their endorsements on Friday, October 25. City Club makes no endorsements concerning candidates or issues and focuses only on presenting a constructive community dialogue, which we hope viewers will see this as such. With that, thank you.